On a snowy Chicago night, a mother's prejudice tears twin sisters apart, one abandoned, one cherished. From a sewer's depths to a courtroom's heights, Ebony and Fiona, unaware of their bond, clash as brilliant lawyers. Fate weaves their paths back together, unearthing buried truths and rekindling love. Will their shared past heal or haunt them? Where are you listening from? Drop a comment and share your guesses. How will this tale unfold? Subscribe to our latest stories and join the journey. Don't miss the twists. Stay until the end. The wind howled through Chicago's streets, a relentless beast clawing at the city's bones. Snow fell in thick, unforgiving sheets, blanketing the world in an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional crunch of boots or the distant wail of a siren. In a shadowed alley near a crumbling apartment complex, a woman stood motionless, her breath forming fleeting clouds in the freezing air. Eleanor, a lawyer whose name commanded respect in courtrooms, clutched a bundle against her chest. Her face, usually a mask of calculated poise, was etched with something raw: fear, shame, and a cold resolve. Inside the bundle, a newborn stirred, her tiny body wrapped in a thin monogrammed blanket, the letter E stitched in elegant gold thread. The infant's skin, a deep ebony, contrasted sharply with Eleanor's pale hands. This was no ordinary night for Eleanor. It was a reckoning. Hours earlier, in the secrecy of a private clinic, she had given birth to twins. The first fair-skinned and blue-eyed, she named Fiona, a child she could mold into her own image. But this child, the one she now held, was different. Her dark skin a mirror of a truth Eleanor refused to face. Prejudice, sharp as the winter wind, had already judged the girl unworthy. Eleanor's heart pounded, not with love, but with panic. Her reputation, her carefully curated life, could not withstand the scandal of a mixed-race child. She had planned every step: the discreet delivery, the lies to her colleagues, the future she would build for Fiona alone. This second daughter had no place in that vision. The alley, shrouded in snow, offered a cruel solution. A rusted sewer grate, half buried in the drift, gaped like an open wound in the earth. It was here, in this forgotten corner of the city, that Eleanor made her choice. She knelt, her knees sinking into the snow, and placed the bundle beside the grate. The infant's soft whimpers grew into piercing cries, each one a dagger to Eleanor's resolve. She hesitated, her gloved hands trembling. For a fleeting moment, she saw the child's eyes, wide, searching, innocent. But the weight of her fear was heavier than her conscience. With a final, shuddering breath, she pushed the blanket through the grate's bars, letting it fall into the darkness below. The cries echoed, muffled by the snow, as Eleanor rose and turned away, her footsteps quickening until she vanished into the storm. Below, in the icy confines of the sewer, the newborn wailed, her voice a desperate plea against the cold. The blanket, already damp, offered little warmth. Her tiny fists clenched, fighting for life in a world that had already rejected her. The sewer's walls, slick with frost, amplified her cries, sending them upward to mingle with the wind. In the apartment complex nearby, lights flickered on as residents stirred, their sleep disturbed by the strange, plaintive sound. "A cat," one muttered, peering through frosted windows. "Must be trapped somewhere." Mrs. Delaney, a retiree on the third floor, couldn't shake the unease. The sound wasn't right, too human, too raw. She dialed the local animal rescue, her voice urgent. "There's something out there crying in the snow. You've got to check." Others called too, their voices overlapping in a chorus of concern. The storm had grounded most responders, but one man, Marcus, a firefighter who volunteered for late-night rescues, answered the call. He pulled on his heavy coat, his breath catching at the thought of an animal suffering in this cold. Marcus arrived at the alley, his flashlight cutting through the blizzard. The cries, faint but persistent, drew him to the grate. He knelt, snow soaking his knees, and shone the light downward. His heart stopped. There, nestled in a sodden blanket, was no animal but a baby, her face scrunched in distress, her cries now weak from exhaustion. "Oh God," he whispered, his voice trembling. He tore off his gloves, his hands shaking as he reached through the bars, but the grate was too narrow. He radioed for help, his voice urgent. "I need backup, now! It's a baby down here!" Minutes stretched like hours as Marcus worked, his fingers numb from the cold. He pried at the grate with a crowbar from his truck, the metal groaning in protest. Finally, it gave way, and he lowered himself into the sewer, the stench and chill biting at his skin. He scooped the infant into his arms, cradling her against his chest. Her cries softened, her tiny body seeking his warmth. "You're safe now," he murmured, climbing back to the surface. The snow swirled around them, but Marcus felt only the weight of the life in his arms. An ambulance screamed through the storm, its lights a beacon in the chaos. Paramedics took the child, wrapping her in heated blankets as they sped to the hospital. Marcus followed, his mind racing. Who could do this? What kind of monster abandons a child to die? At the hospital, doctors fought to stabilize the infant, her temperature dangerously low. They placed her in an incubator, her small chest rising and falling with fragile determination. Marcus stood by the glass, his eyes fixed on her. She was a fighter, this unnamed girl, her spirit unbroken by the cruelty of her first night. As the storm raged outside, the hospital hummed with quiet urgency. Nurses whispered about the miracle baby, saved from the jaws of winter. Marcus lingered, unable to leave. He didn't know her name, didn't know her story, but he felt a pull, a connection he couldn't explain. In that moment, the seeds of a new family were sown, though he couldn't yet see it. For now the infant fought on, her cries now silent, her life hanging in the balance as the city slept, unaware of the tragedy and hope unfolding in its heart. The hospital glowed softly against the Chicago night, its sterile hum a stark contrast to the storm's fading roar outside. Inside, the unnamed infant lay in an incubator, her tiny chest rising with fragile determination, warmed at last by medical care. Marcus, the firefighter who had pulled her from the sewer's icy grip, stood outside the neonatal ward, his broad shoulders slumped against the wall. His hands, still raw from the cold, trembled slightly, not from the chill, but from the weight of what he'd witnessed. The image of the baby, abandoned in a sodden blanket, haunted him, her faint cries echoing in his mind like a siren he couldn't silence. Marcus was no stranger to loss. A firefighter for a decade, he'd seen homes reduced to ash, families torn apart by tragedy. But this was different. This was a deliberate act, a child discarded like refuse. He paced the hallway, his boots leaving faint streaks of melted snow on the linoleum. The nurses, bustling with quiet efficiency, cast sympathetic glances his way. "You saved her," one said, her voice gentle. Marcus nodded, but the words felt hollow. Saving her from the sewer was one thing. What came next for a child no one claimed? He pushed through the ward's glass doors, drawn to the incubator. The baby's face, now peaceful, was framed by a tuft of dark curls. Her tiny hand twitched, as if reaching for something beyond the glass. Marcus pressed his palm against the barrier, his breath catching. "You're a fighter, little one," he whispered. A nurse approached, her clipboard clutched tightly. "She's stable thanks to you, but we need to contact social services. No one's come forward." Marcus's jaw tightened. The thought of this child vanishing into a system, shuffled between foster homes, gnawed at him. He drove home through the quiet streets, the city's lights blurred by lingering snow. His small apartment, shared with his wife, Lena, was a haven of warmth, filled with the scent of her lavender candles and the soft jazz she loved. Lena, a school teacher with a laugh that could light up a room, was waiting, her eyes searching his as he shed his coat. "You're late," she said, her tone gentle but probing. Marcus sank onto the couch, his silence heavy. When he finally spoke, the story poured out. The alley, the grate, the baby's cries. Lena listened, her hand resting on his, her face a mirror of his pain. "We couldn't have kids," Marcus said, his voice low. "All those years, all those tests, and now this." Lena's eyes glistened. They'd faced infertility's cruel verdict together, their dreams of a family fading with each failed treatment. But as Marcus described the baby's grip, her will to survive, something shifted in Lena. "She needs someone," she said, her voice steady. "She needs us." Marcus looked at her, hope flickering like a spark in the dark. "You mean it?" Lena nodded, her smile resolute. "Let's find out how to make her ours." The next morning, Marcus returned to the hospital, Lena by his side. The social worker, a weary woman with kind eyes, explained the process. Background checks, home visits, months of uncertainty. She's a ward of the state now, she said. No family has claimed her. Lena's hand tightened in Marcus's. We want to foster her, she said, her voice unwavering. And if we can, adopt her. The social worker's expression softened. It's a long road, but I'll start the paperwork. Days turned into weeks, and the couple threw themselves into preparation. They painted a nursery in soft yellow, assembled a crib, and filled drawers with tiny clothes. Marcus, usually stoic, found himself lingering over onesies, imagining the child who would wear them. Lena, ever practical, researched parenting books, her excitement tempered by fear. What if we're not enough? She asked one night, her voice small. Marcus pulled her close. We're enough for her. We have to be. The hospital became a second home. Marcus visited daily, his presence a quiet constant in the baby's world. The nurses, now familiar, let him sit by the incubator, where he'd talk softly, telling stories of his childhood, of Lena's terrible cooking, of the life they'd built. One afternoon, the baby's eyes opened, locking onto his. Her tiny hand reached out, pressing against the glass where his rested. Marcus's throat tightened. We're naming you Ebony, he whispered, the name a promise of strength and beauty. The foster approval came faster than expected, a rare stroke of bureaucratic luck. Marcus and Lena stood in the hospital room, their hearts pounding, as a nurse gently placed Ebony in Lena's arms. She was small, barely 5 pounds, but her warmth filled the room. Lena's tears fell silently, and Marcus wrapped his arms around them both, a family forged in an instant. They took her home that evening, the city's lights twinkling like stars through the car window. Ebony slept soundly, unaware of the love that had claimed her. In their apartment, the nursery glowed under a soft lamp. Lena rocked Ebony, humming a lullaby, while Marcus watched, his chest tight with gratitude. The world outside could be cruel, but here, in this moment, they were whole. Ebony's future stretched before them, unwritten but bright. Marcus knew challenges lay ahead, questions of her origins, the scars of her first night, but for now she was theirs. As Lena laid Ebony in the crib, Marcus whispered, You're home, little fighter. The night settled around them, warm and still, a new chapter beginning in the glow of a love that refused to let go. Chicago's skyline shimmered under a spring sun, its glass towers reflecting a city alive with promise. In a cozy apartment, Ebony, now a vibrant 6-year-old, twirled in a sundress, her laughter filling the room like music. Her adoptive parents, Marcus and Lena, watched with quiet pride, their home a sanctuary of love and warmth. Ebony's dark curls bounced as she raced to her easel, splashing paint with fearless abandon. Her spirit, unmarred by the cruelty of her first night, burned bright, a testament to the family that had chosen her. Yet across the city, another girl, Fiona, grew up in a world of polished perfection, unaware of the sister whose life ran parallel to her own. Ebony's days were filled with discovery. At school, she was a whirlwind, quick with a smile, sharper with her mind. Her teachers marveled at her knack for debate, the way she'd argue her case for extra recess with the precision of a lawyer. Lena, ever the educator, nurtured this spark, reading her stories of trailblazers like Thurgood Marshall and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. You can change the world, Ebony, she'd say, her voice steady with belief. Marcus, softer but no less devoted, taught her resilience, showing her how to fix a bike chain or stand tall after a fall. Their love was a scaffolding, building Ebony into a girl who dreamed without limits. But dreams came with questions. Ebony noticed her skin didn't match Marcus's deep brown or Lena's warm tan. Why do I look different? She asked one evening, her small hands tracing her reflection in a mirror. Lena knelt beside her, heart aching. You're ours because we chose you, she said, her words careful. You're a gift, Ebony, and that's all that matters. The truth of her origins remained locked away, a secret Marcus and Lena guarded to shield her from pain. Ebony nodded, her curiosity satisfied for now, but a seed of wonder took root, quiet and persistent. Miles away in a sleek penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, Fiona navigated a different world. At 6, she was Eleanor's pride, a porcelain doll with her mother's fair skin and piercing blue eyes. Eleanor, a legal titan, saw Fiona as her legacy, a vessel for her ambitions. Their home was a gallery of achievement, awards lining the walls, law journals stacked neatly on marble tables. Fiona's days were structured: piano lessons, French tutors, and early exposure to legal texts. "You'll be a lawyer," Eleanor would say, her tone leaving no room for debate. Fiona, eager to please, absorbed her mother's expectations, her childhood shaped by the weight of a future already written. Fiona's world was one of control, but it wasn't without warmth. Eleanor, though stern, doted on her daughter, weaving tales of courtroom triumphs at bedtime. Fiona's imagination soared, picturing herself in a judge's robe, commanding justice. Yet there were moments of quiet rebellion. At school, she'd sneak away from her rigid schedule to draw, her sketches vibrant with colors Eleanor deemed frivolous. "Focus, Fiona," her mother would chide, redirecting her to logic puzzles. Fiona complied, but her heart clung to those stolen moments, a flicker of a self she hadn't yet discovered. The girls' lives, though separate, shared an uncanny rhythm. Ebony, at her school's talent show, recited a poem about justice, her voice ringing with conviction that left the audience hushed. Fiona, at a private academy, won a debate competition, her arguments sharp and unyielding. Both girls, though worlds apart, were drawn to the law, their paths converging toward a destiny neither could see. Ebony's drive came from love, from the belief that she could right wrongs. Fiona's stemmed from duty, from a need to prove herself worthy of her mother's name. In their quiet moments, both girls felt a strange pull. Ebony, lying in her bunk bed, would stare at the ceiling, sensing a piece of herself missing, like a song with a forgotten verse. Fiona, gazing out her bedroom window at the city's glow, felt a similar ache, a longing she couldn't name. Neither knew of the other, yet their hearts whispered of a bond unbroken by distance or time. The monogram blanket, tucked away in a box in Marcus and Lena's closet, held the key to their shared beginning, but it remained untouched, its secrets dormant. Ebony's community shaped her in ways Fiona's could not. Her neighborhood, vibrant and tight-knit, taught her empathy. She volunteered at food drives, her small hands packing bags with care, learning early that justice wasn't just argued in courtrooms, but lived in acts of kindness. Fiona, surrounded by privilege, learned strategy, her mother's lessons in negotiation sharpening her mind. Yet she envied the laughter of children playing freely in the park, a freedom her schedule rarely allowed. Both girls were prodigies in their own right, but their worlds molded them differently, Ebony with heart, Fiona with precision. As the sun set over Chicago, Ebony sat on her porch, sketching a courtroom scene, her pencil dancing with dreams of advocacy. Fiona, in her study, pored over a mock trial brief, her pen circling flaws with surgical focus. Their paths, though divergent, were fueled by a shared fire, a latent strength that would one day draw them together. For now they were strangers, their lives a study in contrasts, love versus duty, freedom versus expectation. The city hummed around them, indifferent to the sisters' separate journeys, its pulse a reminder that fate was patient, waiting for the moment to weave their stories into one. The Chicago courtroom buzzed with tension, its oak-paneled walls absorbing the weight of whispered arguments and rustling papers. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor where Ebony stood, her posture unyielding. At 30, she was a force in family law, her dark eyes sharp with purpose, her tailored suit a quiet declaration of her resolve. Across the room, Fiona, equally formidable, adjusted her notes with meticulous care. Her fair skin and steely gaze mirrored her mother's, but her presence carried a fire all her own. Neither woman knew the other, yet fate had orchestrated this moment, pitting twin sisters against each other in a battle for a child's future. The case was a powder keg, a custody dispute over 8-year-old Lily, caught between a mother desperate to protect her and a father fighting to keep his daughter. Ebony represented Lily's mother, Sarah, a soft-spoken teacher whose quiet strength hid a fierce love. Fiona stood for the father, James, a charismatic businessman whose charm masked a volatile streak. The stakes were brutal. Lily's safety hung in the balance, and both lawyers knew the verdict would shape her life. As the judge called the session to order, Ebony and Fiona locked eyes, an unspoken challenge crackling between them. Ebony opened with a measured but searing argument, her voice steady as she painted Sarah as a devoted mother. "My client has provided stability, love, and a safe home," she said, her words cutting through the room's hum. She presented school records, glowing teacher testimonials, and a neighbor's affidavit, each piece a brick in her case's foundation. Fiona countered with precision, her tone cool but commanding. "Mr. James is a dedicated father," she argued, producing photos of Lily laughing with him at a park, backed by his financial records showing lavish support. The courtroom held its breath, the sisters' skills evenly matched, their strategies a mirror of opposing strengths. As the day wore on, the duel intensified. Ebony's cross-examination of James was surgical. "You missed Lily's last 3 school events," she pressed, her gaze unflinching. James squirmed, his charm faltering under her scrutiny. Fiona objected, her voice sharp, redirecting with questions that highlighted James's efforts to rebuild his bond with Lily. The sisters' rhythms were uncanny. Ebony's passion met Fiona's precision, their arguments weaving a tapestry of conviction. Spectators whispered, captivated by the clash, unaware of the deeper connection binding the two women. During a recess, Ebony caught Fiona's reflection in a hallway mirror, startled by the familiarity in her posture, the way her head tilted when deep in thought. Fiona, sipping coffee, noticed Ebony's intense stare and felt a jolt. Ebony's expressive eyes, her confident stride, echoed something she couldn't place. Neither spoke, but the air between them hummed with an eerie recognition, like a melody half remembered. They returned to the courtroom, their focus razor-sharp, yet the seed of curiosity had been planted, its roots curling beneath the surface. Ebony's breakthrough came late in the trial. Digging through James's financials, she'd uncovered a trail, discreet payments to a woman, late-night texts, hotel receipts. Her investigator confirmed an affair, a secret James had kept from his family. In court, Ebony presented the evidence with devastating calm, screenshots projected on a screen, each message a blow to James's credibility. "This man prioritizes personal indulgences over his daughter's well-being," she declared, her voice resonant with righteous anger. The courtroom gasped, Sarah's eyes brimming with relief. Fiona's face tightened, her composure tested as she scrambled to mitigate the damage. Fiona fought back, her mind racing. She called a character witness, James's sister, who vouched for his love for Lily. "He's made mistakes, but he's committed," the sister pleaded. Fiona's closing argument was a masterclass in emotional appeal, painting James as a flawed but redeemable father. "Denying him custody punishes Lily too," she urged, her voice softening, eyes scanning the judge. But Ebony's evidence was a tide too strong. Her final statement was a plea for Lily's safety, her words wrapping the child in a protective embrace. "Sarah offers a home where Lily can thrive," she said, her conviction unshakable. The judge's gavel fell, granting custody to Sarah. The courtroom exhaled, the tension breaking like a storm passing. Sarah hugged Ebony, tears streaming, while James slumped, his defeat palpable. Fiona shook his hand, her professionalism intact, but her eyes lingered on Ebony, who was gathering her files with quiet triumph. As the crowd dispersed, the sisters stood briefly alone, the weight of their clash settling. "Strong case," Fiona said, her tone clipped but respectful. Ebony nodded, a faint smile curving her lips. "You too," she replied, their words a bridge over an unseen chasm. Outside, the city pulsed with life, indifferent to the moment that had shifted 2 lives. Ebony walked to her car, replaying Fiona's arguments, struck by their shared tenacity. Fiona, heading to her office, couldn't shake the image of Ebony's face, so like her own in fleeting glances. Neither suspected the truth, that they were twins, bound by blood and torn apart by cruelty. The courtroom had been their first collision, a spark in fate's slow-burning plan. As the sun dipped below the skyline, casting Chicago in gold, The sisters carried the echo of their encounter, a silent promise of revelations yet to come. Chicago's autumn air carried a crisp promise, the city streets alive with the rustle of fallen leaves and the hum of evening crowds. Ebony stepped out of her law office, her briefcase swinging lightly, the weight of the recent custody trial still lingering like a half-remembered dream. The courtroom clash with Fiona had left an impression, not just of a formidable opponent, but of something deeper, a flicker of connection she couldn't name. Across town, Fiona sat in her sleek office, the city's skyline framed by her window, her mind drifting to Ebony's fierce arguments, her expressive eyes that seemed to mirror her own in fleeting moments. Neither knew they were twins, but fate, ever patient, was nudging them closer, weaving their lives together through the delicate threads of newfound respect. It began with a chance encounter. Ebony, craving a break from her case files, wandered into a jazz cafe near the Loop, its warm lights and sultry saxophone notes a balm for her restless mind. She settled at a corner table, her fingers tracing the rim of a coffee mug, when a familiar figure caught her eye. Fiona, dressed in a tailored blazer, stood at the counter, ordering a latte with the same precise cadence Ebony had noted in court. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the cafe's hum faded, replaced by a silent recognition. Fiona hesitated, then approached, a cautious smile breaking her usual reserve. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, her voice softer than in the courtroom. Ebony gestured to the empty chair, intrigued. "Didn't expect to see you outside a legal brief," she teased, her warmth disarming. Fiona laughed, a sound that surprised them both with its ease. They talked at first about the trial, dissecting strategies, admitting grudging admiration for each other's skill. But the conversation soon drifted, meandering through shared loves, the soulful ache of Coltrane's ballads, the thrill of a well-crafted closing argument, the quiet joy of a rainy day spent with a book. Ebony's animated gestures mirrored Fiona's subtle nods, their rhythms syncing like a duet long rehearsed. The cafe's clock ticked on, unnoticed, as hours slipped away. Their meetings became a ritual. Over coffee, then dinners, they peeled back layers of their lives. Ebony shared stories of her adoptive parents, Marcus and Lena, their love a cornerstone that grounded her. "They taught me to fight for what's right," she said, her eyes bright with gratitude. Fiona, more guarded, spoke of her mother, Eleanor, a legal giant whose expectations shaped her. "She's brilliant, but demanding," she admitted, a flicker of vulnerability crossing her face. Ebony sensed the weight behind the words, offering a nod that felt like a lifeline. Their differences, Ebony's open heart, Fiona's measured calm, complemented each other, forging a bond that felt both new and strangely timeless. Yet there were moments of uncanny recognition. One evening at a dimly lit restaurant, Fiona laughed at Ebony's impression of a pompous judge, and Ebony froze, struck by the curve of Fiona's smile, so like her own in the mirror. Fiona, watching Ebony gesture passionately about a pro bono case, felt a jolt at the familiar tilt of her head, a mannerism she'd seen in old family photos. Neither voiced these thoughts, dismissing them as coincidence, but the echoes of their shared blood hummed beneath their laughter, a melody waiting to be heard. Their friendship deepened, built on mutual respect and a growing ease, yet shadowed by a truth neither could yet see. They challenged each other, too. Ebony invited Fiona to a community legal clinic where she helped low-income families navigate custody disputes. Fiona, accustomed to high-stakes corporate cases, hesitated but joined, her polished demeanor softening as she listened to a single mother's plea. "You're good at this," Ebony said later, her tone half teasing, half proud. Fiona, in turn, pulled Ebony into a mock trial at her firm, where Ebony's fiery arguments earned nods from senior partners. "You've got a gift," Fiona said, her usual reserve giving way to admiration. These moments, shared in the crucible of their work, cemented their bond, each woman seeing in the other a reflection of her own strength. One night, over wine at Ebony's apartment, Fiona spotted a vinyl record, Ella Fitzgerald's Live at the Apollo, and gasped. "My mom played this when I was a kid," she said, her voice tinged with nostalgia. Ebony grinned, setting the needle to play, and as Ella's voice filled the room, they danced, laughing, their movements mirroring each other's with an eerie grace. The moment felt sacred, a pause in the world's chaos, and for the first time Fiona felt truly seen, not as Eleanor's daughter, but as herself. Ebony, too, felt a warmth she couldn't explain, as if a piece of her soul had found its match. Fiona's invitation came soon after. "Come to a legal gala with me," she said, her eyes bright. "I want you to meet my mother." Ebony agreed, curious about the woman who had shaped Fiona, unaware that Eleanor held the key to her own buried past. As they planned, laughing over dress choices, the city sparkled outside, its lights a constellation guiding them toward a reckoning. Their friendship, born in the heat of a courtroom, had grown into something rare, a bond of equals, unmarred by the secrets still hidden. For now they were simply Ebony and Fiona, two women whose laughter drowned out the whispers of fate, their hearts open to a connection that felt like coming home. The Chicago skyline glittered under a twilight haze, its towers casting long shadows over a quiet park where an ancient oak stood sentinel. Ebony paced beneath its gnarled branches, her breath uneven, her heart a drumbeat of resolve and dread. The legal gala the previous night had been a whirlwind. Fiona's radiant pride, the clink of champagne glasses, and Eleanor's piercing gaze, oblivious to the daughter she'd abandoned. Ebony's discovery of her origins, pieced together from Marcus and Lena's reluctant confession, burned within her. The monogram blanket, its golden E, a silent accusation, had confirmed the unthinkable. Eleanor was her mother, Fiona her twin. Today, under this oak, Ebony would confront the past. She'd asked Fiona and Eleanor to meet her here, her text cryptic but urgent. The park was still, its paths empty save for the rustle of leaves skittering in the breeze. Ebony's fingers traced the edge of a worn photograph Marcus had given her, a snapshot of the blanket, kept as a relic of her rescue. Her mind replayed Lena's tearful words. "We didn't want you to hurt, but you deserve the truth." The revelation had shattered Ebony, not for the loss of a mother she never knew, but for the betrayal of being discarded, deemed unworthy for her skin. Fiona arrived first, her steps light, her smile curious but tinged with concern. "What's this about?" she asked, her blue eyes searching Ebony's face. Ebony managed a tight smile, her voice steady despite the storm within. "Wait for your mom. It's important." Fiona nodded, sensing the weight in Ebony's tone, and leaned against the oak, her presence a quiet anchor. Moments later, Eleanor appeared, her tailored coat impeccable, her expression a mix of impatience and intrigue. "This is highly unusual," she said, her voice clipped, eyes flicking between the two women. The air thickened, charged with an unspoken reckoning. Ebony took a breath, her gaze locking onto Eleanor's. "I know who I am," she began, her voice low but resonant, each word a stone dropped into still water. "I'm the daughter you left in a sewer, wrapped in a blanket with your initial." Eleanor's face paled, her composure fracturing as Ebony held up the photograph, the blanket's monogram unmistakable. "You abandoned me because of my skin, because I didn't fit your perfect world." The words cut through the silence, sharp and unyielding. Fiona gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes darting between Ebony and her mother, confusion giving way to dawning horror. Eleanor staggered back, her breath shallow. "That's impossible," she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. The memory of that snowy night, buried deep, clawed its way to the surface. Her panic, the grate, the cries she'd forced herself to forget. I didn't know you'd survive," she stammered, her words a feeble defense. Ebony's eyes blazed, not with anger, but with a searing clarity. "I did survive," she said, her voice rising, "because a man braver than you crawled into that sewer, because a family chose me when you wouldn't." Fiona's world tilted. She stared at Ebony, seeing her own features in the curve of her jaw, the fire in her eyes. "You're my sister," she whispered, her voice breaking. Ebony nodded, her gaze softening as it met Fiona's. "My twin," she said, the word heavy with a love she hadn't yet fully grasped. Fiona's knees buckled, and she sank to the grass, tears streaming as the truth reshaped her reality. She'd grown up alone, molded by Eleanor's ambition, never knowing a piece of her soul lived in Ebony. Eleanor's hands trembled, her usual poise shattered. "I was young, terrified," she pleaded, her voice cracking. I thought, I thought it was the only way. Ebony shook her head, her expression unyielding. You chose shame over love, she said, her words a quiet condemnation. You didn't even recognize me last night, your own daughter, standing right in front of you. The accusation hung in the air, a mirror to Eleanor's guilt. She reached out, as if to bridge the chasm, but Ebony stepped back, her boundaries firm. I didn't come for your apologies, she said. I came for me, to reclaim my truth. Fiona rose, her face streaked with tears, and moved toward Ebony. I didn't know, she said, her voice raw. I swear I didn't know. Ebony's heart ached at the pain in her sister's eyes, a pain that echoed her own. I know, she said softly, her hand brushing Fiona's arm, a tentative gesture of connection. The sisters stood, bound by a shared wound, their bond fragile but undeniable. Eleanor watched, an outsider to their intimacy, her silence a confession of her failure. The oak's branches swayed above, casting dappled shadows over the trio. Ebony felt a weight lift, not from forgiveness. She wasn't ready for that, but from speaking her truth. She'd carried the secret of her abandonment like a stone, and now, laid bare, it lost its power. Fiona's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining, a silent vow to navigate this revelation together. Eleanor, unable to bear the weight of their gazes, turned away, her footsteps faltering as she retreated, her silhouette swallowed by the park's lengthening shadows. Ebony and Fiona stood alone, the city's distant hum a faint backdrop to their shared silence. The truth had broken them open, exposing raw edges, but it also offered a beginning. Ebony felt Fiona's grip tighten, a lifeline in the chaos. They didn't speak, didn't need to. The oak bore witness, its roots deep and enduring, a symbol of the strength they'd need to move forward. For now, the truth was enough, a painful, beautiful bridge between two sisters, reclaimed from a past that could no longer define them. The Chicago night wrapped Ebony's apartment in a quiet embrace, its walls aglow with the soft flicker of a single lamp. She sat curled on the couch, her face buried in her hands, tears tracing silent paths down her cheeks. The confrontation beneath the oak had unshackled her truth, but it left her raw, the weight of Eleanor's betrayal a bruise on her heart. Marcus and Lena, her adoptive parents, sat beside her, their presence a steady anchor in the storm of her emotions. The air was thick with unspoken love, the kind that had carried Ebony through a life she'd once thought was whole. Now, with Fiona's existence and Eleanor's rejection laid bare, she grappled with a new reality, one that demanded she redefine family. Marcus's hand rested on her shoulder, his calloused fingers warm and familiar. You're still our girl, he said, his voice a low rumble of reassurance. Lena, her eyes glistening, pulled Ebony into her arms, her embrace a fortress against the pain. We kept it from you to protect you, she whispered, her voice breaking. But you're stronger than we ever imagined. Ebony clung to them, her sobs muffled against Lena's sweater. The truth of her abandonment, though spoken, still stung. A mother who'd chosen shame over love, a sister who'd lived a life Ebony could only imagine. Yet in this room, with the people who'd chosen her, she felt the first stirrings of healing. Across the city, Fiona lay awake in her sleek penthouse, the silence oppressive. The revelation that Ebony was her twin had fractured her world, exposing the lie at its core. Eleanor, her mother, the woman she'd idolized, had discarded her sister like a secret too heavy to bear. Fiona's mind replayed Ebony's words under the oak, each one a blade. You didn't even recognize me. She stared at her reflection in the darkened window, seeing Ebony's features in her own, the curve of her jaw, the fire in her eyes. Guilt gnawed at her, not for her mother's actions, but for the privilege she'd unknowingly inherited, a life built on Ebony's loss. Fiona's resolve hardened by morning. She couldn't undo the past, but she could bridge the present. She texted Ebony, her fingers trembling. Can we meet? I don't want to lose you. Ebony, still reeling, hesitated, her heart torn between pain and the pull of her sister's sincerity. But Fiona's words, raw and earnest, stirred something within her, a longing for connection that outweighed her hurt. They agreed to meet at a quiet diner, its retro booths and coffee-scented air, a neutral ground for their fragile new bond. The city hummed outside, indifferent to the sisters' quiet revolution. At the diner, Fiona arrived first, her usual polish softened by a sweater and jeans. Ebony entered, her steps cautious, her eyes guarded but warm. They sat, the clink of mugs a backdrop to their tentative start. "I'm sorry," Fiona began, her voice low. "Not for what she did, I can't change that, but for not knowing you sooner." Ebony's throat tightened, her defenses softening. "You didn't know," she said, her tone gentle. "But you're here now." The words were a lifeline, and Fiona grasped it, her smile trembling. They talked, haltingly at first, sharing fragments of their lives. Ebony's love for jazz, Fiona's secret sketches, their shared dream of justice. The conversation turned to Eleanor, a wound they couldn't ignore. Fiona confessed her anger, her mother's silence since the park a deafening admission of guilt. "She's called, but I can't talk to her yet," she said, her voice tight. Ebony nodded, her own feelings a tangle of grief and defiance. "I don't need her," she said, her voice steady, "but I needed to face her, to let go." The act of confronting Eleanor had freed Ebony, not from love for a mother she never had, but from the shadow of rejection. Fiona listened, her admiration for Ebony's strength deepening, a seed of their bond taking root. Their meetings became a weekly ritual, walks along Lake Michigan, lunches at hidden cafes, moments where laughter outshone pain. Ebony introduced Fiona to her world, inviting her to a community poetry slam where Ebony's words about resilience left Fiona in awe. Fiona in turn shared her sketches, vibrant drawings she'd hidden from Eleanor's judgment. "You're an artist," Ebony said, her grin wide. Fiona blushed, the praise a balm for a part of her long suppressed. These exchanges, small but profound, wove their sisterhood, each moment a stitch in a tapestry of trust. Ebony's healing wasn't linear. Some nights, she'd wake from dreams of snow and darkness, the echo of her infant cries haunting her. She'd call Lena, who'd listen, her voice a soothing thread, pulling Ebony back to the present. Marcus, ever practical, would take her to the fire station, teaching her to tinker with engines, grounding her in the tangible. Their love, unwavering, reminded Ebony that family was chosen, not owed. She began to forgive, not Eleanor, but herself, for the guilt of surviving when she'd been meant to disappear. Fiona, too, sought balance. She distanced herself from Eleanor, needing space to redefine her identity beyond her mother's shadow. She visited Ebony's home, meeting Marcus and Lena, their warmth a stark contrast to Eleanor's cold ambition. "You're lucky," Fiona told Ebony, her voice soft. Ebony squeezed her hand. "We're lucky," she corrected, including Fiona in the circle of her family. The sisters stood together, their bond a quiet defiance against the past, their laughter a promise of a future they'd shape together. As the city's lights twinkled, Ebony and Fiona walked arm in arm, their steps synchronized, their hearts aligned. The wounds were still there, tender but mending, held together by love and choice. They didn't need Eleanor's redemption. They had each other, and that was enough. The night stretched before them, vast and forgiving, a canvas for a sisterhood reclaimed from the ashes of betrayal. The ancient oak in the Chicago park stood resolute, its branches swaying gently in the late afternoon breeze, leaves casting dappled shadows on the grass below. Ebony and Fiona sat beneath it, their laughter mingling with the rustle of the wind, a melody of sisterhood forged through pain and triumph. The city hummed in the distance, its pulse a quiet backdrop to their shared moment. Ebony, her dark curls catching the sunlight, leaned back against the tree, a sketch pad balanced on her knees. Fiona, her fair skin flushed with warmth, traced a pencil over her own drawing, her usual reserve softened by the ease of their bond. This oak, once the stage for a shattering truth, was now their sanctuary, a symbol of roots deeper than blood. Their journey to this moment had been deliberate, a tapestry woven with weekly meetings, shared confessions, and the quiet work of rebuilding. Ebony's life, anchored by Marcus and Lena's unwavering love, had found new richness with Fiona's presence. Fiona, once defined by Eleanor's ambitions, had carved out her own identity, her sister's fire igniting her courage. They were no longer just lawyers or survivors of a cruel past. They were sisters, their connection a defiant bloom in the ashes of abandonment. Today they'd come to the oak to celebrate. A picnic, a simple act, but one heavy with meaning, marking the family they'd chosen to create. Ebony unpacked a basket, her movements brisk but tender, pulling out Lena's homemade cornbread and Marcus's grilled chicken. "Dad's been perfecting this recipe," she said, her grin wide. Fiona chuckled, setting out a bowl of her own contribution, roasted vegetables, a recipe she'd learned despite Eleanor's disdain for cooking. "Mom would have had a fit seeing me in a kitchen," she said, her tone light but edged with freedom. They ate, their conversation flowing from courtroom anecdotes to childhood memories, each story a thread tightening their bond. The food, warm and familiar, tasted like home, a reminder that love was in the details. Marcus and Lena joined them, their arrival heralded by Marcus's booming laugh. Lena carried a thermos of sweet tea, her eyes crinkling with pride as she watched her daughters, Ebony by choice, Fiona by extension. Marcus set up a portable speaker, jazz notes drifting softly, a nod to Ebony's love for Coltrane. "You two look like trouble," he teased, his gaze warm. Fiona, once intimidated by their closeness, now felt enveloped by it, her heart easing into the rhythm of their family. Lena hugged her, whispering, "You're ours now too." Fiona's throat tightened, the words a balm for a loneliness she'd never named. The afternoon unfolded with quiet joy. Ebony and Fiona sketched together, their pencils dancing over pages, Ebony's bold lines capturing the oak's strength, Fiona's delicate strokes tracing its leaves. Marcus challenged them to an impromptu game of tag, his firefighter's agility no match for their laughter-fueled dodges. Lena referred, her mock stern calls dissolving into giggles. The park, alive with other families, seemed to pause for them, their happiness a beacon in the fading light. For Ebony, each moment was a reclaiming, a defiance of the sewer's cold grip. For Fiona, it was a homecoming, a shedding of Eleanor's shadow. Yet the past lingered, a soft ache beneath their joy. Ebony glanced at Fiona, catching the fleeting shadow in her eyes, a reminder of Eleanor's absence. Fiona had seen her mother once since the confrontation, a stilted meeting where Eleanor's apologies felt hollow, her guilt a barrier neither could cross. Ebony, too, carried her own scars, the knowledge that her birth mother had chosen to erase her. But here, with Fiona's laughter and Marcus's proud grin, those wounds felt smaller, their sting dulled by love. "We're enough," Ebony said suddenly, her voice firm. Fiona met her gaze, nodding. "More than enough," she replied, their hands finding each other, fingers entwining like roots. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of amber and rose, they gathered for a photo. Marcus set the camera on a tripod, his arm around Lena, while Ebony and Fiona stood in front, their shoulders touching. The shutter clicked, freezing the moment. A family not born of blood, but of choice. Their smiles a testament to resilience. Ebony felt a surge of gratitude, not just for Fiona's return, but for Marcus and Lena, who'd given her a life worth fighting for. Fiona, too, felt whole, her heart no longer tethered to Eleanor's expectations, but free to love and be loved. They lingered as dusk settled, the oak silhouette stark against the twilight. Ebony packed the basket, her movements slow, savoring the day's warmth. Fiona helped, her usual precision softened by the ease of belonging. Marcus and Lena walked ahead, their hands clasped, their laughter a gentle echo. The sisters followed, their steps synchronized, their bond a quiet strength. The city's lights flickered to life, a constellation of possibilities, and Ebony felt a certainty settle in her bones. This was her family, her truth, her home. Under the oak they paused, the tree's presence a silent witness to their journey. Ebony looked at Fiona, her sister's face illuminated by the last rays of light. "We made it," she said, her voice soft but fierce. Fiona's eyes glistened, her smile radiant. "Together," she said, the word a vow. They turned toward the path, their shadows merging, a single silhouette against the gathering night. The oak stood watch, its branches whispering of endurance, of love that outlasted pain, of a family forged not by fate, but by the courage to choose each other. What did Ebony and Fiona's journey stir in you? Can love truly heal the deepest wounds? or does fate hold the final word? Share your thoughts in the comments. We're dying to hear. A huge thank you for joining us on this emotional ride. If you love this story, hit that subscribe button for more tales of heart and hope. Tell us where you're listening from and what you think lies ahead for the sisters. Until next time, keep chasing stories that move you.